In today's tutorial, we are taking our watercolor paintings and using them to create the most useful of all the stationery items, the personal to-do list. So let's get started. Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Shayda. On this channel, we do artwork like watercolors, bullet journaling, and more. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. And today we're doing something that we've done in the past, and that's watercolor florals. And we're gonna apply it to something new, which is these great little to-do lists. These are something where you can take your artwork and actually make something that you'll use and that you'll see every day. And if you're like me, you love a good to-do list. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start really simple and paint some watercolor florals. This is not complicated, but I am gonna walk you through the whole process, and then we're gonna move those florals into Photoshop. We're gonna lift them and create these gorgeous little to-do lists. This is something that, again, you can have for yourself. It's really pretty and special. It would also make a great gift. It's inexpensive, simple enough to do, but it's something that's so thoughtful and pretty, and I think it would be a perfect birthday or Christmas gift if we're thinking about Christmas. Okay, so let's just jump in. We'll talk supplies, and then we'll get right into the process. So today we are using hot pressed watercolor paper. This is the Arches brand. It was sent to me for my birthday from a viewer, so thank you so much, Momina, for sending that. And hot pressed is great for lifting your designs in Photoshop because it doesn't have a lot of grain. We're also using this watercolor disc set from Fine Tech, so you really don't need anything special for paints. I've got a couple glasses of clean water, and then people have been asking about brushes lately. I love a synthetic round brush. I am using a number 6 from Winsor & Newton and a number 8 round from Grumbacher. So I will try to find those or very, very similar ones on Amazon and link them all in the description. Okay, so what I want to do first is use one brush to mix up some of the warm colors. I'm going to work with a rosy pink and a peach, and I just want to sort of create my color palette to get started. If you're finding that your paints are sometimes too dark or too saturated in color, just mix in lots of water. You want lots of water mixed into these, and that's what gives them their beautiful translucent color. So you can see I've got a nice peach and a rose, and now I'm going to mix up sort of a periwinkle blue by mixing some teal and purple together. I'm going to do a nice minty green here and a bit of blue or teal. I'm just putting lots and lots of water in there, and you can see I'm also keeping my water separate. So I have one for mixing the cool colors and one glass for mixing the warm colors. Now, before we even start painting, let's talk about creating a floral motif, which is what we're going to use for the top of the to-do list. Start by just drawing a curved line, or could be a straight line, and then you're going to sort of map out where the flowers would go. So for this design, I've got one large one, two smaller ones on both sides, and then some leafy shapes or berries. So I start with my simple mapping out, then I can think a little bit more about maybe what kind of flowers I might use, and maybe where I might place a few leaves. So just taking a second to kind of map out your sketch or sketch out this map, or however you want to say it, can help you when you start painting. And I'm just using a Staedtler Triplus fine liner today, and that's also going to come back at the end to help me add that nice black line. Okay, so now let's start painting. I've already got all my colors mixed up. I'm going to start by doing sort of a, maybe we'll call it a rose, and I just do these sort of semicircle brush strokes out from the center of that flower, adding a little bit more color and letting it just bleed out into that shape. So very, very loose, very simple. You could literally just paint circles on the page, and then we can add detail afterwards once this is dry using that black pen. And you can just see me having fun here, adding a little bit more color. For the third flower in this motif, I'm mixing up a darker orange, and you can see that there. It's not a big difference, just a slight difference. And then I'll use these cooler colors for the leaves. So I'm going to do some periwinkle blue leaves and some minty green leaves. And the leaf shapes, again, very, very loose. You could do circles or ovals. You can make them a little bit pointy and leaf-like, like I'm doing here, and add a little more color into that wet puddle. Anytime you add color, it's not going to bleed out of the wet area. So just have fun, experiment, but don't go overboard, especially especially hot pressed paper, it can only accommodate so much water. So know when to pull away, and that will come with time. And you can see me adding some more leaves here, different shapes. I have some oval leaves and some pointy leaves. And then finally, I'm going to add a little bit of that minty green that I had in my initial palette. And that's it, I'm done. Now here you can see I did one other thing. I just thought this would be fun to show. Another great idea if you're feeling not overly confident with this whole floral motif painting process, a great idea is to just step it back and paint in one color. It helps you because you're not thinking about the color palette. All you have to think about is those floral shapes, and blue or black will just look so sophisticated. And so that's what I'm doing here, a similar motif just done in one nice rich purpley blue hue. Now I'm gonna let those dry, wash my brushes, and once they are completely dry, I gave it about an hour, really test it with your hand, and then we're gonna come back in with our pen and we are going to add those wonderful sketchy lines that I love to add so much. And you don't have to be precise with this, you can have fun. I like to make the sketches a little crazy, a little messy, and have these wonky, wobbly lines. I just think that looks so beautiful, and it helps to capture the organic, ephemeral shape and nature of the flower. Now, of course, for the blue floral motif, I'm using a blue pen, and I'll use the black Staedtler Triplus Fine Liner for the other floral motif. But this would also be the point at which you could come back in and add more watercolor paint. So if you're not so into the line drawing, this would be the time where you could come back in and add some more lines and shading with more watercolor paint. And I will just finish off my little blue floral motif, adding lots of dots and lines to indicate the stamen of each flower, and that's done. And I'll move on to the more colorful floral motif. As I said, I'm using black pen for this. I'm gonna start by simply drawing all the leaves in. I'm not trying to go exactly with the lines. I like to leave a little white space. I like things to be very wonky and perfectly imperfect. And the reason I'm starting with the leaves is just I know what I want them to look like. They're leaves. I sort of have them in my mind. I have an idea. Once those are done, I'll head in and start doing the flowers, which is a little more scary but fun. Now, for the stamen on these, what I would call poppies, I'm doing sort of a scribbly spiral and then loosening up that spiral and just moving outwards. And you can see on the second one here, it's like drawing the broken rings of Saturn. You're just going round and round to indicate these petals. Almost, this is sort of like a poppy or maybe a ranunculus flower, and they're just really fun to draw. And then for the last one, I'm going to do sort of a loose English rose. So I'm starting with a lot of dots for that stamen in the center of the flower, and then I'm going to start with my 4 petals, 4 floppy petals, and then we go around and around and around, doing another 4 petals and another 4 petals, and you get this big, beautiful, floppy pink flower. And there we go, all done, both floral motifs. I hope you get a feel for how simple this process can be. Those watercolor paintings can be quite abstract before you add that black line, and you certainly don't need any special supplies. Dollar store watercolor discs will do the job. So moving on, we're gonna open up Photoshop on our computer and we're gonna import our floral motif. And you can either scan your image into the computer or you can simply take a photograph of it. This doesn't need to be super, super high resolution, so don't worry too much about this step. Just get the image into Photoshop. Okay, and you can see once we're in Photoshop, in the layers palette on the right-hand side, we have one layer that's background. You're gonna right-click on that and click duplicate copy so that you don't have to work with the original. All right, now moving on, we are going to make sure we're on the right layer, although that background should be locked. And the first thing we're going to do is use the quick selection tool. On my screen here, the quick selection is the 4th thing down in the left-hand tools menu here, and my shortcut for that is W. Now you can see when I zoom in, all we have to do is click, click the image and it's finding the edges. So it does a fairly good job of finding the edges of our watercolor painting. It's especially nice that we have these black lines and that we've used hot press paper, which doesn't have all this texture that the scanner can pick up. So we just keep left clicking with the mouse and the selection tool will keep selecting our florals. Now when we come to the end, if there's anything the quick selection has missed, we can use the lasso. The lasso tool is the third item down in the left-hand tools menu. My shortcut is L, and all you have to do is click and drag. So what I'm doing here is clicking and following the outline of that watercolor floral. And you can see the light pink is so faint. That's why the quick selection had trouble with that. And I'll do it manually with the lasso, and it doesn't matter if I get it perfect. No one's ever gonna know exactly where that faint pink watercolor puddle ended and where I just cut across it with the lasso tool. Then when I'm pretty sure I've selected everything, I'll come down here to the very right bottom corner. I'm gonna click this icon, the circle inside of the square, and that creates a layer mask. And now you can see, you can get a preview of what you've clipped out. And this is non-destructive, so you're not cropping anything. It's just a great way to check and make sure that your selections are exactly what you want and that everything looks great. And if that is the case, you'll simply right-click the layer and go to Apply Layer Mask. Alternatively, you can simply click Command J when you're done selecting, and that will create a new layer out of your selected area. So now we've essentially created some clip art and we are going to export our clip art. So we will go to File, Export, Layers to Files. You can browse to find the correct file on your computer, and then once you're all set up, just click Run. And at this point, Photoshop will export each different layer as its own piece of clip art. So if you've lifted a bunch of stuff, it'll all be separate files. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of start a new project. We come back into Photoshop and create a new document, and you wanna make sure that it's 8.5 by 11 inches and that it is set in inches, portrait orientation, color could be CMYK because we're gonna print it, but don't worry about that too much. But we're creating a document that looks just like a piece of printer paper, basically. So once we've got that set up, what we're gonna do is go to View, Rulers. I've already got mine on, but click that, and then you'll see this ruler across the top and the left-hand side of your Photoshop screen. And what you're gonna do is click it and drag a line out. So all you have to do is click and drag to get that line. I'm gonna place a line in the middle at 4 1/4. So 8.5 divided by 2, 4 1/4. Pull down a line from the top there, and I'm just gonna place it 1/2 inch from the top of my page because I don't want to work too close to the edge. My printer doesn't print right to the edge. And then I'll pull down another line. I don't want my to-do list to be a full 11 or 10 inches long. I want it about 9 inches. So now that I've got my to-do list laid out, I'm gonna go over here to the pen tool, or P, select that from the toolbar, and then all I have to do to create a line is click, left click with the mouse, hold Shift, and then click again. That's about how long I want my lines to be. Now I'll go to the top of the toolbar and grab the Move tool. I'm gonna zoom in so you guys can see this. What I'm gonna do is, using the Move tool, I'm going to click on my line and hold Option down. Anytime you hold Option, it's like an instant copy. So I just hold Option, click and drag. Option, click and drag. And I keep making these lines, or repeating these lines until I've got a bunch. And don't worry about getting them evenly spaced, because now what we're gonna do is select all of them, go up to Layer, Distribute, and then click Vertical Centers. And voila! Photoshop will fix the alignment for you, which is really nice. You can also use Layer, Align, and Horizontal Centers, and if it wasn't all centered together, that would fix that. Now what I want to do is select all of them, or I've selected all except the top one because I know I've got too many, and I'm just going to drag it down again. So that will just save me a little bit of time as opposed to doing each line one by one. I'm going to drag this whole thing up and try to get the to-do list looking the way I want. Now, of course, I can see that I've got a few too many lines here, maybe one or two too many, so I'm going to zoom in, click the line, go over to the layer and just delete layer. That's looking a little better. So now what I'll do is I'll select this whole thing again, layer, distribute, vertical centers, because I had that little area in the middle that needed to be aligned. And now everything's even and it's looking great. So now what I can do is bring in my florals. I'll go to File, Place Embedded, and then I just need to find it wherever it is on your desktop. Go grab that clip art that we made, and you're gonna click Place. Once it's in, just hold Shift and drag that little box to resize your florals, and then you can kind of just get them in this sort of in the area that you want them. Keep resizing. Click Enter to place them, and then anytime you want to resize, just Command T and then click Shift when you're pulling those boxes out. You always click Shift when you're resizing, otherwise you could stretch your image and get it kind of wonky. And I'm just gonna try to get mine just so here. I know I'll have to resize it again, but I'm sort of trying to place it. And now I can see I actually still have too many lines, so I'm going to delete another layer, delete that top line. Now what I want to do is go use the text tool and create a text box, and we'll put to-do list in here. I'm going to use Times New Roman and just guess at the font size. Write out to-do list, and then of course I'm going to start resizing again. So this is all sort of your layout and design process, and I'm trying to show you part of mine, but I don't want to bore you. One thing I like to adjust is the tracking. So I'm over here in the adjustment panel. I've moved that tracking to 200. I like my letters well spaced. And that is such an important part of design, especially the design including fonts, and that can just really elevate your work. And so tracking, so important. And then I'm adding a little personal element. I'm going to put my name. I'm using a font that a free font that I downloaded from the internet called Elsie Claire. So you can always Google that and find that. It's not something that you could sell or redistribute, but you can use it for personal use. So I'm gonna just sort of playing around here, trying to get everything looking just so. Do you want your words to be centered? Do we want to sort of tuck them under the flowers? Totally up to you, and I'm just having fun and working with the design. Okay, and then once you're happy with the way that your lines, your text, and your florals look, what we're gonna do is select all the layers, whether you select them in the layers panel or just click and select everything and click and drag, and then we're gonna drag everything over into the right-hand side here. You can see I'm able to use the guidelines that I put in place at the very beginning and the guidelines that Photoshop is showing me to make sure that everything is evenly spaced, and that these will be the exact same, sort of a mirror image. Okay, and that looks great. And basically now all I want to do is save this and then do a test print. So what I'm going to do here is click print. I don't want to do a whole bunch of prints at once. Make sure you're in portrait mode. Just make sure the preview looks good. And then we're going to click print. And of course, once you've printed one and you're happy with it, then you can print out about 15 of these pages. That'll give you 30 to-do list sheets. And then just use your favorite cutting tool or device to slice these up and get them even. I have a great paper cutter. This was an awesome birthday gift from Chris a few years ago, but you can use an X-Acto knife on a cutting mat or a ruler and scissors, whatever. So get those cut up, and then we are ready to assemble. To complete our project, I've added some nice stiff cardboard on the back and then some ribbon or twine to hold everything together. A great place to get a nice piece of cardboard is the back of your watercolor paper pads. So just an idea there. And that's it. That's the to-do list. You could make this for a friend or make it for yourself. And patrons of my YouTube channel will be able to make this quite easily, because if you head over to my Patreon page after today's video, you can grab my printable design, just download and print. Thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next Friday with a new tutorial.